if there are concerns, let us say, in the United States or even in Europe, they very consciously and deliberately over the last 2 decades allowed their businesses to relocate. That was their choice, it was their strategy. It isn't only about concerns about immigration or mobility. The part which concerns us is to convince them that mobility, the use of talent across boundaries, is to our mutual benefit. That they would be net losers if they actually erect too many roadblocks to the flow of talent.
It was not too long ago that we used to talk about brain drain. Then came around 2000 when the Vajpayee government actually started the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. When actually you began from talking about brain drain, you started celebrating the achievements of the Indian diaspora abroad. But now I see a third phase where your government is actually promoting mobility by doing this migration and mobility agreements. So how has this new phase come? I mean, what is the thinking behind that the government is taking the lead to promote the movement of our talent around the world?
No, you're right. I think we have evolved. I think the brain drain perspective was very much more reflective of a protectionist era, where we saw a zero-sum game between us and the world. That if something went out to the world, it was lost to us. And that has obviously changed because as the diaspora grew and maintained its connect, you realize actually that they were an asset and they were a link rather than a loss. The second phase to me was important because it was actually a strong psychological, emotional message, a realization that actually someone who's mobile, someone who's emigrant, someone who's already emigrated, actually maintains the linkage to India. I think it needed, a very grounded political understanding of Indian society, rather than a very academic, theoretical view of people. To realize that, even if Indians went, even if they went 100 years, 150 years ago, that they still maintained their connections. And I think the Vajpayee government did a great service by creating that, understanding and formalizing it in many ways. And today, last 10, 12 years, I would say under Prime Minister Modi, we've come out of the protectionist mindset. We are in many ways looking at the world much more confidently, exploring many more opportunities. Secondly, we have further consolidated the link with the diaspora. So we've taken the second phase and built further on it. But more than that, I think there's an appreciation today that, look, the nature of work, the nature of the economy, the comparative advantages we have, I would say even after COVID, the willingness to work, these are all today factors in creating new opportunities. Now, if you stay with that old mindset, and if there are people who do, there's nothing you can do about it. But if you stay with that old mindset, you're actually going to miss out on a lot of possibilities. And, my sense is today, especially the youth of India, because they are so informed, because they are so connected, their imagination is not limited to the national boundaries. They are quite willing to explore opportunities abroad, and I think that's good for us.
There's another change. You talked about how much the government today is willing to spend to deal with the difficulties that Indians face abroad. But there was a time in the protectionist era, shall we say, you went abroad, you were on your own. That it was your fate. That you had to deal with the real world out there. To one where the transition, now you mentioned, the kind of effort that the government puts in, how much of demand you get from the states, for example, from the chief ministers, to do this work a lot more vigorously?
That's also been an evolution. Again, if I were to sum up the changes of the last decade in two parts, one is to create the kind of SOPs, the practices for this to happen, because it's not that easy. If the Ministry of External Affairs were to ask the Air Force or the Ministry of Defense to send out planes, to send out ships, or to ask airline carriers to dedicate planes, unless they are habituated, unless it has been worked out in advance, it doesn't happen. Unless you have a culture, even within our own system, let us say of, I don't want in a crisis someone saying, where is the authorization to house, 1,000 people who have landed up at my doorstep. So we've actually had to undergo, in many ways, a change in our own attitudes and thinking. That if there is a crisis, if there is a problem, solve it. You have the resources, you have the flexibility, you are empowered to do it. The systems are ready. We've all practiced it a lot. Every time we do an operation, can be big ones. And when I look back, the first one for me, when I came back as Foreign Secretary in 2015 was Yemen. But now I've even forgotten, in the last 12 years, how many of these we've done. We've done Afghanistan, we did Israel, we did Iran, we did Sudan. I'm not talking of first responder disaster. I'm talking of bringing back Indians from conflict situations. And what has happened is we have kind of honed a system where we even have a unit in the ministry. The moment you kind of flick a switch, they know, okay, get moving on this. So that's one I would say, important part of it. The other part of it is, this we do get, it's understandable that chief ministers, state governments write to us. But we also try to make them understand that, look, once you leave the shores of India, for us, you are Indians, so I can understand the pressures and compulsions on a chief minister. So we hear it, we absorb it, but at the end of the day, it just feeds into a national metrics of a plan which we deploy outside.
Minister, what you said about the current policy of migration is very impressive, but there are 3-4 contradictions built into the policy. One, you yourself referred to legal versus illegal. Now, how are you addressing that question in this migration and mobility agreements? 21 you have signed. What has been the experience implementing that this, while you promote legal migration, you also work with the foreign governments to prevent illegal immigration?
Well, I think we can be one part of the change, but our partner government has to be the other part of the change. And one of the reasons why we do these agreements is we try to make them understand, look, unless we cooperate, it's in our interest that mobility is legal. It is therefore a corollary of that, it's in our interest to be against illegal, irregular mobility. But that also requires cooperation. So if you can't say, I'll do one part and not do the other part. Just like we wouldn't say do the legal and by the way, we won't do anything for you on the illegal. But they also cannot expect we'll do everything on the illegal and by the way, stay out of the legal. So this is a compact, it is a working arrangement that we have. The legal and the illegal are two sides of the same coin. We have to cooperate on both. And again, cooperation has many facets here. Often, because one big challenge is always that we have an obligation if there is any of our citizens who's abroad illegally, we have an obligation to take them back. I don't think that's standard international practice. But we have to verify that they are indeed ours. So there are a lot of issues here, sometimes documentation. Now, there are countries which cite privacy. But they can't have it both ways. They can't say it's privacy, we can't tell you, but by the way, he's yours, take him back. So So we need a degree of transparency and understanding here. And that's really what we try to do, which is really, work out understandings with different countries. And my experience with these 21 odd agreements and, has been that wherever actually we have a formal understanding, over a period of time, it has actually been very effective. Yeah. It would not be wise of me to give specifics here, but I know there were governments and often my own counterparts personally who began this exercise very skeptically, but then they saw for themselves that how much better the system works when we do have such a collaboration.
Minister, second contradiction is really, for 60 years or so, much of the Western world was very open for immigration. Starting with our doctors, then our professors, now you have actually the IT professionals going all across the Western world, especially the English-speaking world. But that open...
Not necessarily the English-speaking world.
But
there are some non-English speaking which have actually shown very strong
recently
growth in recent
I'm talking about
times.
historically.
Yes.
But across the world, both English-speaking and non-English-speaking world, there is a political and social backlash against too much immigration. So that tension between, the economic needs require some foreign talent, but at the same time, political and social pressures to limit or restrict that immigration. We're seeing that in the H1B debate in the US. How are you dealing with this tension that is unfolding?
Well, I think a lot of these are issues, Raj, which they have to resolve. Because in many cases, the actual crisis has nothing to do with the mobility of the incoming workforce. If there are concerns, let us say, in the United States or even in Europe, it is because they very consciously and deliberately over the last 2 decades allowed their businesses to relocate. That was their choice, it was their strategy. So if there is pressure on jobs in many of the developed countries, the pressure on jobs is less because people came in those sectors. It is more because they allowed manufacturing to go out, and you know where.
Yeah.
So I think they have to find ways of fixing it, and many of them are, because if you see, it isn't only about concerns about immigration or mobility. It is also about loss of jobs and about recreating manufacturing and pulling back, what was allowed to leave over many decades. So I can't give you a simple answer to it, but the part which concerns us is to convince them that mobility, the use of talent across boundaries, is to our mutual benefit, that they would be net losers if they actually erect too many roadblocks to the flow of talent. And particularly if you move into an era of advanced manufacturing, if, this will be, you will need more talent, not less talent. Yeah. And talent cannot be organically developed at a high rate. There is a certain structural impediment out there. So, and in their own societies, you can see the tension. Often the people in the forefront of entrepreneurship and technology would actually make the case for mobility. It is the people who I would say have a certain political base or a constituency to address who may oppose it. And they will probably reach some modus vivendi there.
So some kind of a new balance between the economic and political should be worked out.
Yes, but also some kind of new balance between the mobility of people and the mobility of work. If it becomes harder for people to travel, the work's not going to stop, okay? So if people don't travel, the work will travel.
So the insourcing or outsourcing, no, there is a third contradiction. While exporting talent.
Last two, by the way, didn't end up as contradictions.
You're trying to resolve them. But third one is really, is one thing to export talent, but you also, your domestic needs for the same talent are also growing as you try to do more manufacturing, more advanced technologies, more medical doctors. In every field where migration we've seen grow, there are also domestic needs, and I already see the government talking about returnees or facilitating some talent coming back. So where do you see this tension playing itself out?
I don't want this to seem political, but this is actually a statement of fact. As a sort of a sweeping proposition, the number of educational institutions in this country in the last 10 years have doubled over what they were in the 60 odd years they were before that. What actually happened was after the first spurt, we somewhere plateaued. You and I are of the same generation. Probably when we left school, there were 5 IITs in the country. Till when we hit the our middle age, there were still 5 IITs in the country. The manner in which, I'm just using IIT as a shorthand, don't take it literally. But the manner in which, let us say, our engineering schools, our technical schools, our medical schools, our nursing institutions, take whichever field. We didn't see, if you had a certain growth rate, it made common sense your capacities should have paralleled the growth of your economy. It didn't happen. So it's actually been, in the last 10 years, there's been this huge emphasis on increasing capacity. And why I say that to you is, you are not going to solve this problem, this apparent contradiction you refer to. You can't tell people, don't go out to work.
It's a freedom of movement.
We're a democratic society. They have a freedom to travel. If they get better prospects, of course they will look at it. The common sense thing is to create opportunities at home. To create opportunities at home, you need to address both the demand side and the supply side. The supply side means you've got to, keep increasing your output of skilled and talented people. And the demand side would be, unless you are able to post, sustained high growth rates, you're not going to be able to, find opportunities for their employment and retention.
One way of actually resolving this dilemma is also, as I said, strengthening the talent base in the country. That also, we've seen some foreign universities come in. I think for many countries, it makes sense rather than drawing students in to set up universities in India.
Absolutely.
But is there enough reform from the government side to actually facilitate foreign universities operate here and create skill?
It's interesting. I was at a school of management over the weekend. And because I was there, I looked into the history of that institution and saw the foreign collaboration with which it started. This was, by the way, the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta.
The first one in the country.
Yeah, the first one in the country. The initial phase when institutions were created in this country actually had a lot of foreign collaboration. Most of your original IITs, for example, had partners. Many of the agriculture universities had partners. The management institutions had partners. Then this plateau phase, where actually there was relatively little creation.
Also the protectionist phase?
Yeah, it was also the protectionist phase. I don't think the two, it was not a coincidence. Yeah. So what we have now done is we've actually liberalized, because again, as I said, like talent can move out or work can come in. We have today close to 1 million foreign students, 1 million Indian students studying abroad, 1 million. Why is that? Does it not make sense actually to liberalize the educational environment so that the universities come? It's cheaper, it's effective, we stand to benefit. There's a very powerful logic, and it's happening now. We've had actually, I think it began with a few Australian universities. I know a number of British universities have come in, including one fairly close in the National Capital Territory, National Capital Region. And I see many more happening. You know, I mean, I was in Canada a few weeks ago, and I can tell you, Canadian universities which draw in a lot of students, many of them are actually quite interested in setting up campuses in India. And I think we see benefit in this, and we have left it very open. You know, they can come in on their own, they can come in collaboratively, they can do double degrees, they can do brownfield. I mean, it's up to them to figure out.
So one last contradiction, or a seeming contradiction, or a tension, if you will, that while you talked about demographics in your presentation, and there is actually a steep decline of in the Western societies, in Far East, in China, in Japan, Korea, everywhere. But there's also an Indian decline that we're beginning to see, certainly in the South Indian states. But the fact is, at what point do we need to think through? I mean, how do you promoting netlist policies, which many countries are doing? Is that something too far away at this point, or we have enough talent base today to deal with a potential decline in India's own demographic?
You know, I think it's a matter of degree, but it's important. It's natural with prosperity that there is a tapering. But what we are seeing internationally is actually in many societies a very, very sharp fall, which the word decline would be more appropriate. So often, you know, when people try in our business to forecast the world and say, okay, what's really going to change in 10 years? You are saying what will change in 5 years, other than your magazine would be selling in more places. So people, you know, common answer would be, well, technology, AI. I think if you, you know, demographic trends are a significantly underrated, understudied aspect of the change that awaits us, because they could actually have very, you know, sweeping implications for the future of many societies, and each one of them has some peculiar, you know, reason for why the fall is very, very sharp. Where it tapers, I think the situation is much more amenable to you know, adaptation, and it will, you know, this will happen. I mean, it's a natural trend. I don't think you can mitigate it, but it's not something you can actually reverse.